186. That's the number of trials it took me to get this product right. And I know what you're gonna say. That is absolutely insane. But when you're developing a plant-based barista drink from scratch with a clean label brief, no allergen, no seed oils, no stabilizer, and with the client that know exactly what they want, this number is actually okay. Today, I'm going to be completely transparent with you and walk you through the entire journey about how I developed this product. The good part, the really challenging part, the mistakes that I've made, everything. Because if you're thinking of developing a drink product right now, whatever it is, or if you already starting doing so, I'm hoping that this video is gonna save you a lot of time and possibly money. If you're new here, hello and welcome to the Food Lab podcast. This is the place where we talk honestly about what it takes for a food and drink brand in the UK to succeed in retailers' shelves. So let's start by explaining a little bit more about the project. My client was already running a successful cookie brand. They wanted to extend into a plant-based barista drink. Let's start by explaining a little bit more about the project. My client was already running a successful allergen-free and vegan cookie brand, and they wanted to extend their range into a plant-based barista drink. Now, I want to tell you something upfront, which I told my customers at the time. I never developed as a food scientist working 10 years in the food industry. I never developed myself a plant-based barista drinks. So as I told her, I would need quite a lot of research to understand all of the aspects of this product. But let's go back to the brief for a moment. So the brief was a clean label, allergen-free, no seed oil, no added sugar, no stabilizer, such as gel and gum or guar gum, no lecithin. Nothing like that. And when you look at the plant-based barista drink on the market, actually, they have at least one or multiple of these ingredients. So all of these additives or some of the ingredients are a little bit like shortcuts for food scientists. They help, for example, the foam stability, they will help with the texture or the shelf life. They are not necessarily bad for you, but they are not clean label. So right away, we removed quite a lot of tools. When you look around and you see all of the competitors have these ingredients, we removed already quite a lot of useful tools for product developers. So I always say to my clients, I don't overpromise something is, I think I can do it, but I don't overly promise on, yeah, absolutely, I can do it. And like I say to them, the more constraints you have like this, the harder the project and the product is going to be. And actually, even myself, in terms of timelines, I was way off. There's a lot of problems in this project, like obviously I didn't anticipate it. The first thing I do with this kind of brief is really to understand the characteristics of the product that my clients want. And especially when a lot of things are in play in terms of the mouthfeel, the texture, the flavors, how it smells like, all of these things. So the first thing I've done was to organize a product workshop. So it means I remember like it was yesterday, we met in London in the coffee shop, and I had my luggage with about 12 different plant-based barista drink. So we tried them all on their own, and we tried them all with coffee. There was a few almond drink, oat drink, soya drink, pea drink as well. There was quite a lot of different brands and a lot of plant-based ingredients. What was interesting is only few were actually good on their own and good with coffee, but most of them were neither good on his own and even less good with coffee. And that was something that was very important to my client, was to create a plant-based drink that was enjoyable on its own, but especially with coffee. So flavor pairing was a very important job for me to achieve, not only because every single coffee will have a different taste, different acidity, a different flavor profile, but she really wanted to create a product that was enjoyable with coffee. Not a plant-based drink that you have to pour in your coffee either because you are vegan or because you are lactose intolerant, but you have to because you don't really have choice. Something, yeah, you genuinely enjoy, you know is gonna taste incredible. It was also understanding all of the characteristics of the coffee, what we wanted to keep and what we wanted slightly to mute. So for example, decreasing slightly the acidity and the bitterness of the coffee, but not muted completely all of the flavor characteristic of the coffee. This product workshop allowed us to have, especially me, to have all of the clear direction of the characteristics she wanted, but keep it real. Like we had dairy milk, and we knew that we will never be able to achieve the creaminess or the mouthfeel necessarily of this, or the same, the creaminess of some of the oat milk. So it was trying to keep it in the constraints of the brief, but at least have direction and benchmark products where I can try to get as close as possible. I would say during all of the trials I've done and the tastings we have done together, the flavor pairing for me was the most interesting because she didn't want a strong flavor that was recognizable, that she didn't want a hazelnut coffee flavor or vanilla coffee flavor. She just wanted a hint of a flavor where people don't necessarily can tell what it is, but it enhances the whole experience of drinking your latte or your flat white, for example. A lot of my trials were based on finding the right flavor pairing. And I remember our first tasting, I think I was playing with some of the caramel and toffee flavors because she wanted to use natural flavorings. Buttery came up as a no-go. Sometimes you can find, all of the coffee syrup with very buttery note, but personally, and my client agree, I didn't think that a buttery coffee is necessarily a good match. There was a lot of trials involving understanding what would pair nice with the different types of coffee without being overpowering. So anything that is a little bit spicy, a little bit caramelic, a little bit roasted, buttery was a no-go, for example. So now let me tell you about the foam challenge. So we know that a plant-based barista drink has to foam, especially when your client wants the product to go directly to baristas and coffee shop. It has to foam, but what I learned, it has to foam well. So my first objective with the foam was to make it foam as much as possible. I didn't want the coffee to have that little small except if it's a flat white. But for latte, I wanted that very good foam. I achieved that, very happy with that. We went for all of our tasting, we went every time to a different coffee shop and working directly with the baristas to have their direct feedback. And oh boy, the first tasting, that barista was telling me things that I would never even think before. Basically, to summarize, my foam was more like a bubble bath. Meaning, yes, it was foaming really quickly, really well, but the bubbles were huge and it couldn't really do a proper latte. What he suggested was to increase the amount of fat in our product, so that will reduce the size of the bubbles and make it especially more fluid. So he could do all of the latte art or pour a nice flat white. So it wasn't the quantity of the foam, it was the quality of the foam, making much more fluid. That was the most important thing for the barista. And also it has to foam very quickly. You have to imagine when you have a dozen of customers coming at a rush, then you have to foam every single of your coffee very, very quickly. So if it takes 5 minutes to foam, that is going to be a no-go for them. So I spent a lot of time around flavor pairing, finding the right fluidity of the foam. But something that was the biggest challenge was actually how to protect the integrity of the protein once it goes into the acidity of the coffee. Let me explain a little bit more. So protein will be sensitive to different things. So if, for example, you think of white egg, they are gloopy liquid. By agitation, then suddenly it transforms into a foam. So protein are transformed with temperature, with agitation and high shear, and with acidity. So with acidity, they tend to curdle and transform into little scrambled eggs, which is obviously not what you want in your coffee, right? So that was an interesting surprise. So I knew about the protein and the acidity, but I didn't expect it to be so much of a challenge to actually find the right acidity regulator. So what the acidity regulator does, it basically just increase slightly the pH of the coffee and the drink in general. So it protects a little bit more the protein so they don't transform into scrambled eggs. We needed to have that conversation with my client because acidity regulator are additives, but there was nothing much more clean label that I could find that I've tried that had the same property, unfortunately. So we had to find a compromise of, okay, it's not going to be 100% clean label, but we really need to have the acidity regulator to protect the protein and just have a nice homogeneous drink. The curdles protein, you couldn't really taste it when you were drinking the coffee. So it's such a tiny, tiny size of particles that you can't really detect anything on your tongue when you're drinking it. But you could just see the separation with all of the protein coming at the bottom of the coffee. So it didn't look appealing at all. Finding the right acidity regulators, because they also all have a different taste. So they have different challenges on their own. They all impact the taste of the drink and therefore the coffee. Some of them were really metallic. Some of them tasted like bicarbonate soda. So not really nice. Some of them tasted very chemical. So finding the right acidity regulator for the technicality, but also in terms of taste, was a huge challenge. Okay, so I hope you're also learning along the way of this podcast episode a little bit more about plant-based barista drink as well. That was all of the technicality of the product. But then my mission was to find suppliers for my client. So most of my clients are either startups or they are small businesses. So the minimum order quantities, the MOQs, is very important for them because most of the suppliers will have a minimum of 25 kilos. And when you use an ingredient at 0.1% or less, that is a lot. That can last you for years, especially if you're not producing a huge amount of your product yet. So my mistake was to spend about 6 months of trying suppliers that actually have small MOQs, the ones that were not too expensive, and there were some ingredients that we had to remove. For example, vitamin, I found out, was one of the most expensive ingredients. Some of them were £2,000 a kilo. Yeah. So again, we had to compromise on some of the ingredients. So I spent 6 months of doing that and forgetting something that is fundamental. That's why I'm telling you this Contract manufacturers, most of the time, have their own set of suppliers, and they don't necessarily accept every other suppliers for different customers. They have their suppliers, they have a good price for the good quantity that they buy from them, and that's it. So it means also that you don't necessarily have to worry about finding the suppliers with small MOQs because they will already bring their own suppliers. My recommendation, and this is what I do now with my customers, is to work in parallel. So while I'm going to work very hard on the prototype and creating the product from scratch at a lab scale, what I recommend my clients to do at the same time is to start looking for contract manufacturers, but at least ask them these type of questions. You don't need to decide the contract manufacturer you're going to have because, again, you don't necessarily have the recipe yet, but working in parallel, asking them the right questions from the start can save you 6 months of work, for example. And this is sometimes questions I have from my clients, especially when they are startup and they are creating their first food and drink product, will be around costs. How much my product is a cost, which supplier should I go for? Can you help me find the right suppliers? Can you give me a rough idea of how much it's going to cost? That's why you need to contact the contract manufacturer as soon as possible and work in parallel with me when I developed the prototypes, is because I won't be able to answer this kind of questions. I may be able to give you a rough ideas, especially when I know that some vitamin costs £2,000 a kilo. So I can definitely tell you that it will be challenging for some ingredients, but it is almost impossible for me to tell you how much your product is going to cost at the first stage, which is the prototype stage, because again, I don't have the suppliers, and the quantity you buy from certain suppliers will depend on the cost. So if you buy a little or if you buy a ton, for example, the cost is going to change. And again, if you go to a contract manufacturer that already have all of the suppliers, all of the ingredients and all of the costs set, there is no point of me spending months of, this is what I did, asking for all of the costs and not knowing exactly how much quantity we will produce. All of this is a slight waste of time. That's why you need to contact your contract manufacturer or a different contract manufacturer as soon as possible. Okay, we saw the technicalities, we saw my biggest mistakes when it comes to contract manufacturers and suppliers. Now we're going to talk about pilot plans before you even go to your contract manufacturer. This section is all about finding the right partners for you. And I can give you 2 examples with this project. That was, again, quite challenging. I'm sorry, I keep on saying it was challenging. It was like most product developments, full of challenges, but full of solutions, and it's so rewarding at the end when you can have the product right. Okay, so the first partner we contacted to do pilot plant trials just before going to contract manufacturer with the proper prototype told us that, yes, they know what they're doing in terms of plant-based barista drink. They have done that before. They have all of the equipment. They have all of the knowledge. No problem at all. So I had conversation with the food scientist who was helping us running the pilot plant trials. I explained exactly what the process was, what the machines we need, and tick, 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 all good, no problem at all. Turned out to be complete bullshit. As soon as I came to the pilot plant with all of the machine, I clearly realized that we will have issues. A lot of things were not even health and safety. It was not what I expected and what my client paid for. Not only that, but the knowledge of the machine. I remember when It was a disaster. It was such a disaster that at the end, some of the pump were blocked, and they blame our ingredients. They blamed our recipe. They were basically just using the wrong equipment, something blocked, and they were just blaming us. We had to mix things manually and put it back in the tank, and it was dangerous. It was not health and safety. It was not good. And then when I saw the color of the product coming out of the tank, and my client saw my face, and they asked me, "Is that the normal color? Because I don't remember he had that color." And I was like, that's not what the color is usually. The color of the plant-based drink was usually quite cream color, like light cream. This one was brown. So we couldn't, at the end, we couldn't even produce the plant-based barista milk because there were so many issues. One of the machines didn't work, so we couldn't homogenize. It was an absolute disaster, and I think my client was refunded 50% of the total day. So I'm gonna say it for me, it was a scam. They had some machines, but definitely not suitable for our plant-based barista drink. So lesson for you guys, don't trust what the partner, whatever the partner is, if is someone that do your product development, if it's a supplier, if it's a contract manufacturer, if it's any other contractor, do not trust just what they say. Go where the production or the production is, have a look around, have a look for yourself. Don't trust just that they can do it and they know what they're doing, because some people will do anything to get their money in. So if you can, ask as many questions as possible, especially proof if they've done it before, what type of product they worked with before, and go there first. Because I think I would have gone there and see by myself, I would have straight away seen that there was a problem and the equipment was not what we were looking for. We had to find another partner to run our pilot plant trials. And this time we went to a British university and had all of the equipment we needed. Not only it was a food scientist with a PhD and years of experience dealing with plant-based drink, but also they had all of the equipment if we wanted to do pasteurization or doing sterilization. They had homogenization, all of the equipment that was needed to go to contract manufacturer and be as close as what the contract manufacturer will do. And this is exactly what you need to expect from a pilot plant trials, running with a food scientist that know exactly how to run the machine, that can help you with the formulation and find solutions to your problem. Because let's be honest, every time you have a recipe that you want to scale up, there are going to be problems. Always. A lot of things changes. So you need someone that really understands the science behind the machine, the process, formulation, to be able to help you and guide you along the way. But you also need the right machinery. But this time, the challenge was different. And it is actually something that I've seen a lot talking to different food scientists and academic. The problem that we have as food scientists, and I talk from experience, is that we are taught that additives is a must-have in any formulation. They're going to make the product perfect. It's going to look absolutely perfect. It's going to taste perfect. When we ran the first trial, of course, we had some issues and we had to identify the issue. But what pissed me off, and still pisses me off when I think about it, is when food scientists always jump straight to additives as this is the solution, is going to solve all of our problems. This is what additives do. Additives are here to solve problems and help the formulation. But we also have to look at other aspects, such as the process. So when the first trial didn't come up as expected, it was not homogeneous. So you can feel the fat was not blending properly. It just seems like he wanted to just separate from the product. So it is a big problem. Is if the fat is not incorporated homogeneously in your product. But then that food scientist jumped straight to additives. He didn't even ask about the scope, the requirement, what was possible, what was not possible. He spent ages of blaming my formula for the problem. But you don't have additives, you don't have lecithin, you don't have guar gum, you don't have all of the stabilizer and the emulsifiers. That's why it's not working. So I had to explain that this is a clean label, or as close as possible to a clean label product, and this is the requirement I was dealt with and I really wanted to achieve. So after a few back and forth, I decided to let it go and think, you know what, let's give it a try. So we tried with lecithin, we tried with guar gum. Guess what? Nothing changes. The problem wasn't solved. Absolutely nothing changed. So I think this is a myth in the food science community that we think additives are going to solve all of the issues. Guess what? It doesn't. Additives are not always the solution. So we had a fat that was quite solid at room temperature, and we needed something that was actually liquid. It was just a shock of temperature. So when you have a fat that is solid and you melt it away, as soon as it has a shock of cold temperature, it wants to solidify it again. So we needed something that was liquid all the way through, whatever the temperature. That's it. That's all we needed. As soon as we understood the problem, we changed the ingredients. Everything was perfect. We did a few trials. We came back few times to be sure we tried different things. For example, trying pasteurization and sterilization. So a few weeks passed between each of the trials, and on the latest trial we had a little issue where again the product was not homogenized properly. So I asked what was the parameter of the homogenizer, the pressure and the temperature from the last trial, which was my fault. I should have written it down. And he couldn't remember, but I'm sure he decreased, that we saw that the process had an impact on how the fat blend properly. When it's too harsh, there's something that is not just working. But obviously, as I didn't take the right notes, I couldn't blame him. He jumped straight away to, but it's because you don't have lecithin. I was like, oh, for God's sake. We're not having that conversation again. It's like, we tried and it doesn't work. And he made the product green. I'm not lying. Oh, it's because you don't have a stabilizer like gel and gum. It's like, we've tried that. And again, it didn't work. So again, after argument, it's like, you know what? Fine. Let's try again your lecithin and then we will see. And guess what? Nothing happened. The product was exactly the same, except, like I said, it was greener. It was not the additives. Again, the solution was in the process. So we went through sterilization. Everything was perfect. The product came out completely homogeneous, looked exactly the right color, exactly like I was making it in the lab. And even a food scientist admitted that it was a great product and he didn't need it, all of the additives. So again, my point is not to just vent at people. The point of what I'm saying that to you is, again, if you have a vision as a food and drink brand, like you want something that is clean label as possible, you just have to believe in that vision. You may have to compromise, like we did with the acidity regulator. You just have to find the right partner that understand why behind your vision, that understand what you want to achieve, that align with their vision and will do anything possible to make it happen. Not lying about what they can do when they actually can't, and not jumping straight to additives when your objective is to have something that is clean label. At the end, the product is stable and can run through pasteurization and sterilization without any problems. Pilot plant trial ticked. And now the next step for this product will be to go through a contract manufacturer and see, obviously, at a way bigger scale, how the product is gonna react. And the last section of this episode is also for you to be aware of if you are a food and drink brand that wants to go to contract manufacturer for your product. And this is around intellectual property. And I'm saying that from experience when I talk to my clients about it and they had issue with their contract manufacturer around the intellectual property. Food and drink brands that heard, and I will mention it in a second, through events or networking, but also customers that came to me and that's the first question they ask is, what about my intellectual property around the recipe? So when I was at the Nourish conference organized by the Taste Buds Collective a few weeks ago, when I was talking about flavors, there was one of the drink founder that explained her struggle with the contract manufacturer. And she was explaining she lost £20,000 with that contract manufacturer. It was very difficult. She had to find a job to be able to pay for these £20,000 that she lost. And then finally, happy ending, she found the right contract manufacturer for her. So I asked the questions about intellectual property with her and working with contract manufacturer, because I know that there is sometimes an issue around this. And she basically said that's why she lost £20,000, is because the first contract manufacturer she came to kept the intellectual property. So when something happened and she wanted to change the contract manufacturer because she wasn't really happy with them anymore, they said, fine, but we have all of the intellectual property of your recipe. So that's why she had to buy back her intellectual property and it cost her £20,000. I had a chat at the conference about that with someone else, and for me it sounds ludicrous, but you have to be aware of it. Like, for example, I developed a product from scratch, but for me, there is no point of me keeping the intellectual property of the recipe. For me, it belongs to the founder, to the brand. But for a lot of contract manufacturer, because they produce because they have the suppliers and they pack everything for you, therefore they think they should have the intellectual property. So be careful if you're in that stage. Really ask the question, really read the contract to be sure you have the intellectual property, or at least it's the 50-50%, but at least you have the intellectual property as well. So as you saw, you probably understand a little bit more why I had to have 186 trials between formulation challenges, between partners challenges, a challenging but incredible brief. I was very, very proud to work on a product that was different from the one found in supermarkets, that had minimum ingredients, but every ingredient we put in that recipe had a meaning. We know why each ingredient is there. There is no fillers, there is no additive, except obviously the pH regulators, but they are all here for a reason. Then all of the technical challenges that we have, finding the right partners, my mistakes along the way, you get it. It was a challenging, but again, so rewarding project to work on. And it's going to be the same for every single product development, whatever, sometimes you're like me and you focus only on the flavors, or you create a project from scratch, there are struggles along the way that you don't expect. You can't avoid them. But the most important thing is always thinking about the solution, even if you have to think outside of the box. So don't focus too much on the problem. Always focus on the solution, because there is always a solution. Again, you may have to compromise, but there are solutions. Okay, your challenge this week, if you accept, if you are going to work with a contract manufacturer, is to write down these 4 very important questions for your next meeting with them. And this is the minimum. The more questions you have, the better. But the first questions is about their lead time, because contract manufacturers are very busy and sometimes you have to wait 6 months to be able for them to run your recipe. 2, very important, what are their minimum order quantities? Because you will have to pay upfront. So if, for example, their minimum order quantities is 5,000 units, you will have to pay upfront for 5,000 units. Question number 3, do they handle the storage and the distribution? Again, that happened to a founder I talked to, and he was saying that he found the contract manufacturer, but they didn't store the product for them, so he has to store all of his product in his garage. Do not assume all of the contract manufacturer will handle storage and the distribution for you. And 4, which is probably the most important one, who owns the intellectual property, and be sure you do. So which one of these 4 questions would you find the most awkward to ask your contract manufacturer? Leave a comment below. If you found this episode helpful, share it with someone who is in the process of developing a food and drink product right now. It may save them 6 months and a lot of money. And I will see you in the next episode. Bye!